Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor review to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, our first few training camp cuts, a couple of other pieces of news, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Panthers, Rangers, Islanders, and the Penguins, amongst other teams. We'll get to all the updates regarding these teams coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, don't forget to leave a comment, and don't forget to stay tuned for my videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we got another news and rumor review here to discuss as per usual. We'll look at a couple of signings from our past couple of days. There were three signings I want to talk about here. So first, back in the Vancouver Canucks organization, they've recently signed Gabe Chiarot, who's a right shot defenseman, 19 years old, who was taken just this past year in the 2025 draft, 6th round draft pick, signs a 3-year ELC with a $915,000. So because he was just taken, not too much to talk about here. Chiarot this past year had 21 goals and 35 points and 66 OHL games. Looks like he could eventually be a really solid player at the NHL level. Probably going to need a couple of years of development time, but not a bad pickup here from the Canucks as they are able to sign Chiarot, a new 3-year ELC. Another player was signed to an ELC by the Vancouver Canucks, and that's a 2024 4th round pick, center prospect Riley Patterson. Patterson, who's 19 years old, gets a 3-year ELC, AAV of $925,000 this past year. Had also been playing over in the OHL, putting up 25 goals and 59 points in 64 games. Looked a pretty good, solid player at the OHL level. Had some really good showings in rookie camp. I think eventually could be a really solid third line center there for the Vancouver Canucks. Not a bad ELC there, but Canucks have signed Patterson to his new deal. And then we saw another 2024 draft selection, 5th round pick, Chase Wutzke, who's a goaltending prospect for the Minnesota Wild, taking 5th round 2024 draft. He's 19 years old, gets a 3-year ELC, AAV of $955,000. Not a bad pickup here for the Wild. Wutzke last year played in the WHL, playing in 50 games, putting up a 3.3 AJA, 895 save percentage. Not overly great numbers, but I think Wutzke eventually could be a really solid backup / 1B goaltender at the NHL level, but it's going to be a number of years before he's able to challenge for an NHL level spot. So very interesting note there. But some very good, interesting ELCs have been signed recently, 3 of them, as Minnesota signed Wutzke and the Canucks have signed Patterson and Chiarot to new ELCs, so very interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So once again, long injury list here, so I'm going to try and touch on all of these guys here. Nick Waugh and Max Domi have begun to practice for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they recover from their respective injuries. They haven't gotten into regular practice yet. I think they were in no contact jerseys, but it's good news to see it Waugh and Domi, who are both suffering with minor injuries at this point in time, start to practice. So it's very good news there for the Leafs. Malkin has returned to practice after missing a few days with an illness. So we talked about that a couple of videos ago. Good to see that Celebrini is able to get back. Alex Ovechkin is out day-to-day with a minor lower body injury. Doesn't seem like Ovechkin will miss too much time, but he is currently out day-to-day with a lower body injury. Jared McCann is out day-to-day with a lower body injury. Well, Nathan Villeneuve, one of the new Kraken prospects, will be out for the rest of the training camp with a lower body injury. So it's a bad blow there for Villeneuve, who I think could have had a really solid training camp. While McCann, it seems like it's going to be a little more of a short-term injury, and hopefully he should be ready to go in the next couple of days. Matt Zuccarello, who is currently out with undisclosed injury, will find out if he needs surgery over the next couple of days. So it seems like Zuccarello will definitely miss the start of the season for the Minnesota Wild. So hopefully it's not going to be an overly long injury, but if he gets surgery, it could be a lot longer. So that could be a really bad blow there for the Minnesota Wild. Tyler Kleven left a preseason game with an undisclosed injury and didn't return for the Ottawa Senators. That's a bad blow. If that's going to be anything serious, that's going to be an awful blow for Ottawa, who is counting on Kleven to be a really solid third-pair defenseman this upcoming season. And then Jack McBain, Logan Cooley, and Barrett Hayden are all out day-to-day with undisclosed injuries. Doesn't seem like any of those are major injuries, so they should be able to get back in the next week or two, but still bad stuff there. That some of the more prominent names in the Utah Mammoth organization are currently out with injuries. So very interesting note there. But those are all the injury updates from our past couple of days regarding Waugh, Domi, Celebrini, Ovechkin, McCann, Villeneuve, Zuccarello, Kleven, McBain, Cooley, and Hayton. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to the training camp cuts. So we saw our first few training camp cuts over the past couple of days. Now there's a long list of loyal players here. I'm not going to go through all of them, just some of the more significant names that jumped out to me. So the Flames cut 1 player from training camp. The Avs cut 3 players from training camp. The Stars cut 6 players during training camp, including Muhonen, who was recently signed back to WHL, and Cameron Schmidt, one of the guys we talked about in a recent video in the offseason preview, one of the first picks in the 2025 draft for the Dallas Stars back to WHL. Edmonton sent 2 players off training camp. LA sent 4 players and cut them, including Carter George, who was a really solid showing at the training camp this past year, back to the OHL. I think eventually George has the potential to be a really solid goaltender. Minnesota cut 9 players. Nashville cut 6 players. The Islanders cut 3 players. The Sens also cut 3 players, including moving Vanek, who was one of the recent acquisitions in the draft, to juniors. San Jose cut 7 players, including moving Guriev to the AHL, as well as recent first-round pick in the 2025 draft, Ravensburgen, to the WHL. So obviously they weren't able to get NHL opportunities, but I think those 2 have futures at the NHL level. Seattle cut 6 players, including moving recent first-round pick Jake O'Brien to the OHL, and recent second-round pick Blake Fiddler to the WHL, so very interesting note there. St. Louis cut 5 players, including moving Adam Dzeko back to the WHL. The Canucks cut 9 players, including moving Alex Medvedev, their new goalie of the future, to the OHL. Riley Patterson, recently signed guy who we just mentioned, back to the OHL. And Josh Bloom to the AHL. Vegas cut 8 players. And Winnipeg cut 6 players, including moving recent acquisition Kevin He in the draft to the juniors as well. So very interesting note there. But lots of very interesting training camp cuts as teams start to dwindle down their rosters. And some of these guys are going back to their junior teams, so very interesting note there. And lastly, here going over to a couple of very interesting updates when involving some big pieces of news. First, when it comes to the Predators and Luca Evangelista, according to David Pagnotta recently, they're still very far apart on a deal. It seems like at this point in time, the Preds view him as like a $1.5 million player or a $2 million player. That's sort of what I'm getting from all the reports that are coming out, where Evangelista sort of views himself in the $3 to $4 million range, which I think is reasonable. I mean, Evangelista is coming off a pretty solid season. He's a guy who I think has the ceiling of being like a 30 to 35 goal scorer and a 60 to 70 point player. So I'm not sure why there's such a big gap. Like, the Preds had the cap space to give it to Evangelista, and they could definitely use more younger players on their team. So I'm still very perplexed as to why Evangelista and the Predators haven't come to terms on a deal. But very interesting to know there, Pagnotta says that these 2 sides are so far apart, and it doesn't seem like a deal is going to come in the next couple of days. When it comes to Carter Hart, some recent reporting has said that the Vegas Golden Knights and Carolina Hurricanes are the frontrunners to land Carter Hart. So that makes some sense. For Golden Knights, they have Aiden Hill. They currently have Akira Schmid as the backup. I don't think Schmid at this point in time is the best of NHL backup. So if I was to sign like a 1 to 2 year deal, he could be the solid backup for the Vegas Golden Knights to Aiden Hill. And who knows, if he does well, and I know it's a little bit soon for the players who are in that World Junior scandal to be playing, but still, if Hart plays like he did before he got suspended in Philadelphia, that could be a massive addition for the Vegas Golden Knights. Meanwhile, for the Carolina Hurricanes, it also makes some sense. They do have Anderson Kochetkov under contract for the upcoming season, but Kochetkov has had very inconsistent play. Anderson is injury prone and entering the final year of his deal. So I'm not sure if they acquired Hart, if they would move a guy like Kochetkov on waivers. If they would run with 3 goaltenders, would they move Hart on waivers? I'm not exactly sure, but I can see this sort of fit, because after this year, Anderson's gone, Hart could easily be the starter for the Carolina Hurricanes. So very interesting to note there. Some very interesting potentials there for Carter Hart, but it seems like Hart is dwindling down his list of teams he'd like to sign with, and apparently, according to some recent reports, Carolina and Vegas are the front runners. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, we got a couple of things to talk about here. First, regarding James Murphy, he was doing a recent article, and he mentions that this past offseason, at least the Montreal Canadiens and 2 Florida teams have checked in on the availability of Evgeny Malkin. Now that's very interesting note there. Malkin is entering the final year of his deal. There's a lot of speculation that Malkin will probably go overseas back to the KHL. After this current season ends, we already know for sure that the Penguins do not intend to bring back Evgeny Malkin beyond this upcoming season, so it's going to be the end of an era. Malkin has a really solid player for the Pittsburgh Penguins, helped them win a couple of cups, including I think it was back in 08 or 09 versus the Detroit Red Wings, as well as back-to-back cups against the Sharks and the Preds. So Malkin has been a really solid second-line center, playing behind Crosby for a number of years now, but it seems seems that's about to come to an end. So if the Penguins, based on a lot of speculation, most likely going to be a team who misses the playoffs, they're looking to try and sell, and they're looking to be a really good spot to try and land Gavin McKenna. According to some recent reports, they could look to try and move off a couple pieces. We've talked about Rust, Raquel, Carlson, some of their lower end players. Malkin's a guy who seems to be a guy who could wind up being moved at the trade deadline. Now, of course, Malkin, I think, has no movement clause, so this is all up to Malkin. But like, the teams who have checked in make some sense. Like, Tampa could definitely use a second line center. Malkin would be a really solid strengthening of the Bolt center group. Panthers could definitely use another upgrade. Like, we know the Panthers have been able to get some solid players. I'm not sure if they really have the space for Malkin, both contract wise and on the roster, because they have like Barkov, Bennett, and Lundell. But like, it might make some sense if they were able to move one of those guys to the wing. And for the Habs, like we talked about all offseason long about them looking for a second line center, Malkin could easily be the second line center for that Montreal Canadiens team if they were able to make some sort of deal work. So I don't think Malkin's going to move in the very near future. I think if the Penguins are well off a playoff spot come the trade deadline, that's probably when Malkin will get moved. But at this point in time, I don't think it's going to happen. But interesting note there that according to James Murphy, the Habs, Panthers, and Bolts all checked in on Evgeny Malkin this last offseason, so very interesting note there. Next one over to Frank Seravalli. He mentions that when it comes to the New York Rangers, they plan on waiting a little bit before extending Artemi Panarin. So that makes some sense in my opinion. Like, I don't think the Rangers are a guaranteed playoff team by any means. I think the Rangers could make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they missed it. And if they were like, let's say 5-10 points out of playoff spot come the trade deadline, and Panarin has not signed at this point, would it make some sense to potentially move Artemi Panarin? Like, if they were to move Panarin, retain 50% of his contract, you'd be able to knock him down to like a $5.6 million player. Like, a lot, and I mean a lot of playoff bound teams to the trade deadline would love to add an Artemi Panarin at just under $6 million. Like, that would make a ton of sense. Now, once again, Panarin could still sign an extension with the Rangers, maybe like a 2 to 3 year deal, sort of like a lower AAV to remain with the Rangers. But if he's still looking for like a 3 to 4 year deal, like $8 to $9, $10 million. I'm not sure if it makes sense for the Rangers to keep him. So if he's still unsigned come the trade deadline, it might make some sense to move him. I personally think Columbus would be a really good fit. Have Panarin go back to the Jackets. But Seravalli mentions that the Rangers are not in any hurry at this point in time to sign Panarin. They want to see where the direction of the season goes before they consider potentially extending him. And I think that makes total sense, especially if this Rangers team is on the outside looking to come the trade deadline. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the New York Rangers, as they could potentially move Artemi Panarin later in the season. But according to Frank Seravalli, there's no intent at current point in time to sign him in the next couple of weeks. And lastly, going over to Chris Johnston, he says that contending teams who feel that they're ready to go to contention, are going to be monitoring teams who have slow starts and are going to be ready to pounce. So we've talked about this over the past couple of years. There's always a team or two out there who has some very interesting players who have slow starts that leads to a couple of trades earlier on in the season. Johnston mentions the Islanders, Penguins, and Bruins as 3 teams who contenders are going to have their eyes on, and I think that makes a ton of sense. Pittsburgh, I think, is a very likely chance to get to a slow start, and if they do, if they haven't moved them by the start of the season, Rust, Raquel, Carlson's name are going to come up yet again. The Islanders have a couple of interesting pending UFAs, including guys like Anders Lee and JG Pajot, as well as a couple of longer-term defenseman players, and if they get out to a slow start, which I think is a very likely possibility, they could try and move off a couple of those pieces. And for the Boston Bruins, I feel that this is the team who's not going to have an overly great season this upcoming season, so if they wind up going out to a slow start, Zacha and Mills are going to be hot commodities come the first few months of the season. So very interesting note there. Once again, no guarantees that these guys have slow starts, but teams who do have slow starts, contenders will be monitoring very closely, according to Chris Johnston, as they could be looking to try and apply good players out of those teams if they have slow starts. So we'll have to keep our eye on trades in October, November regarding teams who have slow starts. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all I want to talk for today. I'll let you guys thoughts. Which teams do you think could have slow starts and quickly move off pieces? Do you think Malkin could go to Florida, Tampa, or Montreal? And do you think the Rangers could move Panarin if they don't extend him by the trade deadline? Definitely thoughts on all of that. Plus all the news updates, the injury updates, the training camp cuts, and the signings. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Until this video, and if you're listening, subscribe below. Thank you for all your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. Also a blog to my news, rumors, analysis. If that's where check that out. I've linked that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.